Hello and welcome to the Tough Cover Radio Show. You just heard me with Ryan Beef Coyle. We were doing 2/3 of the college football big brain show, and we said, let's give this to the people on the Tough Cover Radio Show. Big college football week, so we had to get Ryan Beef Coyle to hop on and give his opinions. But here we are back to normal with my co-host on the other side, Sean Barnard. Sean Barnard, you can follow him at Sean_Bernard1. Sean, how you doing?
Can't complain, man, other than, the life being taken out of our basketball team so early in the season. So struggling through that a little bit, but overall, we're in the heart of things. College basketball kicking up now in the heart of NFL season, college football. I'm still in pretty good spirits considering.
I'll be honest, I can think of quite a few things to complain about, maybe outside of the world of sports. But that's a different show. That's a different topic. But hey, yeah, Sean Brace and John Jansen talked all about it on Wednesday anyway. Yeah, but that's a whole it's a shame that we will not see the NBA champion or the NFL champion for the next 4 years go to the White House. That's all I'll say. Anyway, back on track, back to regularly scheduled programming. And I just realized something because I didn't lay out my picks. I'm not going to give out the info that I usually give with the college football picks. You got most of it on that interview with Ryan Beef Coyle. You can follow at Ryan Coyle 35. Check out his stuff over at Beef Up Front. But my pick's just running them down real fast before we get over to the NFL. At 3:30, I've got Duke plus 3.5 at NC State. One of my favorite plays after the week, even after they screwed me last week at 4 units. Indiana minus 14 against Michigan for 3 units at 3:30. My best bet of the week, Colorado minus 3.5 at Texas Tech at 4 o'clock. We can talk about that real fast because I know Sean Barnard will talk about this. It is not being talked about enough, the job that Coach Prime has done. And I'm not some Coach Prime rider or Coach Prime fan. I don't really have a take either way. I never really did, even when, at the beginning of last year, he was getting too much attention. And then I've always kind of said in the offseason and the early part of the season, he was getting way too much hate. He took over a 1-11 Colorado team. Here we are at 6-2. They have a path to the Big 12 championship. They have a path to the college football playoff. And I got to tell you, I don't think they lose any of the remaining games on their schedule. This week is their toughest. They're only a 3.5-point dog. They're at a tough Texas Tech team. But Texas Tech's coming off the biggest win in their coach's era at Texas Tech the last 3 years against Iowa State, handing them their first loss. I think there's an emotional letdown. Colorado coming off of a bye, bad pass defense. I think Shedeur goes off in this game. Any takes on Colorado, Sean?
Yeah, I'm on Colorado as well for this one. That I'm in total agreement with you that it's very strange to me. The better Colorado has gotten, the less we hear about them. And you're absolutely right that I think there's legitimate pathway to them making the real deal college football playoffs. They're ranked 20th in the country right now, and this will be their toughest matchup from here. So I've been impressed with what I've seen. I think Deion deserves more flowers than he's gotten. I know the noise was a little loud with the first season, but I really feel like this year has gone under talked about, and it's surprising to me that a guy like Deion Sanders is falling short of the spotlight, but that seems to be the situation.
And then here's another one that I know Sean Bernard's going to like. I'm back on Vandy at 4:15 plus 6.5 at home against South Carolina, and a South Carolina team that I backed and won with last week against Texas A&M. They won that game. That was a big upset for them. And that was a big win for them. I think there's going to be a little bit of a letdown. Vandy, that's just what they do now. They went on the road. They beat Auburn. They're going to come home, and they're going to win again as an underdog. They're 6-0 against the spread as a dog, 4 outright wins as a dog. That's not just a throwaway stat at this point. That's 4 outright wins as an underdog, most of them as a double-digit underdog. So it is not being paid enough attention to by the books about what Vanderbilt's doing. And I know South Carolina's had a high power rating all year. I got this at plus 6.5. That's where it's hitting now. It looks like this line might keep going up. This line was at 2.5. Wow. This line's been bet up 4 points. I don't care. I'm walking into the trap. Give me Vandy plus 6.5.
Yeah, even the plus 180 on the money line I'm seeing looks juicy to me. And I will say probably my favorite part about college football in general is when there is that quarterback that makes you believe. And that's Diego Pavia. It's just completely right there. That every single time that guy touches the football, I think he's going to make something happen. And guess what? Most of the time he does. So I'm in on this Vanderbilt team. They have done me quite well throughout this season. So I feel like I can't turn away down. So absolutely in on them for today's matchup. And we'll see how things shake out.
And this is their biggest remaining game, kind of, because you have South Carolina at home, and then you go at LSU, And then Tennessee at home, which is basically on the road there in Tennessee. That'll be all Volunteers fans. So LSU, Tennessee, those are going to be really tough games. I'm not saying, you can't count them out in any game here. You saw what they played, how they played against Texas, but this is their last game that they'll be within a touchdown of the spread here. So I do like Vandy a lot in that one. At 7 o'clock, I've got Oregon minus 24 against Maryland, laying the points against Sam's Terps there. I just think Oregon is a special team. You see what they have at running back, at two guys at receiver. Dylan Gabriel, who I've been skeptical about in the past, has been fantastic. I think the offensive coordinator's doing a heck of a job. Dan Lanning's obviously a great defensive coach. So it's hard to argue against them being the best team in the country right now. So I'm laying the points. Another team I'm laying the points with, and not a team I've backed a lot this year, but when I have, they've covered easily, and it's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I'm laying 25.5 points. I mean, it's not like they lost as a 25.5 point favorite this year or anything, but anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Other than that one game, they've really taken care of business all year long. And, Sean Brace is trying to tell me they're a title contender. I don't think they belong in the playoffs, let alone, but that's a whole other conversation. They're number 10 right now. Do I agree with that ranking? Absolutely not. I think they should be outside of the top 12, to be honest. But I think that they take care of Florida State handily, who is the most disappointing team in the history of sports, maybe. I can't remember a team being more. They went from being an undefeated team that got maybe screwed out of making the playoff due to an injury. And then you turn around and there's an argument to be made that they're the worst team in the Power Four. They might be the worst team out of the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and ACC. I don't know if there's a worse team.
And they're like unwatchable. Like they're not even just like a bad football team. It's like DJU is absolutely a terrible watch. Like the whole team, there's nothing there. And it blows my mind that this team was ranked highly coming into the year, that there was genuine hype around this team. I never imagined it could get this bad. And I am glad you brought up the Notre Dame stuff, because I do share that same opinion, that I think that one loss should straight up rule them out from playoff contention. I understand the expanded format and that they have taken care of business since that point, but that is one that leaves scars in my mind, losing that game as poorly as they did, looking as bad as they did in that one. So I do think Notre Dame should be on the outside looking in, but it does feel like the general consensus is that people are believing them more than I expected to be the case.
Well, they're going to win out, so they're going to be in 100%. I mean, the college football playoff put them number 10. I mean, if they lose another game, they're out. But the college football playoff put them at number 10 in the first rankings. They're only going to rise up. I mean, they're probably going to play a home playoff game. And I think that that's wrong. I'm a Notre Dame fan, and I think I can point that out. But I will say the reason that the conversation has become the way it has with Notre Dame is what Texas A&M has done since that loss. They haven't lost a game. Or they just lost their second game against South Carolina. But they're still sitting there top 15 in the country. That's helping Notre Dame a lot. I mean, Notre Dame better hope. It's one of those interesting things where if Texas A&M collapses down the stretch here, they have a couple tough games. They're probably going to lose to Texas down the stretch, probably be on the outside looking in. Is it one of those things where we adjust how good that win is? Because, it felt like a really great win 2 weeks ago. Then they lose to South Carolina. If they go lose one or two more games and they're only 8-4, it's kind of interesting. Like Miami beat Florida in week 1. We haven't really adjusted for that win not mattering because Florida's not.
Florida's been better.
Okay. They're 4-5 or whatever they are sitting there. So they're not terrible, but it's one of those things in college football where we don't always go back and regrade sometimes. Sure. We kind of grade how it looks at the time. Like even Penn State, you beat a USC team that we thought was going to be pretty good, and they're 4-5 now. So that's a whole other. I want to move on. We don't have to get bogged down in college football. Let's move on to the NFL. But real quick, just wrapping it up. Pitt minus 7.5 against Virginia. That's a small play. And then the last big game, LSU, Bama. I don't have a play on Ole Miss, Georgia. Do you have anything there?
Do not.
I
lean Georgia, but I kind of have flip-flopped on it. Lean Georgia, but nothing for me.
I can't get a read at all there. I tweeted it out, but I would love to go back and look at all my Ole Miss bets. I feel like I'm like 3-15 betting Ole Miss when on or against Lane Kiffin when he's there. I just haven't had a read on them at his entire tenure.
And Carson Beck has been a disaster lately.
Yeah, it's funny. His stats don't look as bad as it appears on the eye test. When you watch him, it is brutal at times, and the decision making. I have become lower and lower and lower on every quarterback prospect that is available in this draft. And the one guy who I was starting to become really high on until the second half against Texas A&M 2 weeks ago, Garrett Nussmeier at LSU, and Jalen Milroe is another guy who's vaulted into that conversation. I've made it clear, Jalen Milroe, it's funny, he's the exact guy that I would always fall in love with. I mean, he's the kind of a similar prospect to Jalen Hurts in some ways. You could point to with the way that Jalen played at Oklahoma. In fact, he's such an athletic runner and he's a great deep ball thrower. I actually think he's so much more limited as a passer outside of that deep ball than Jalen was. And Jalen came in as a really limited passer, at least in a lot of people's opinions. I was a little bit higher on him than a lot of people were coming out of Oklahoma. But I just don't think Jalen Milroe can do enough in the intermediate and short passing game. And he has shown he's another guy who has shown some boggling decision-making tendencies. So LSU, I know Garrett Nussmeier threw up all over himself in that second half, and Brian Kelly collapsed in that second half in a big game. But I'm back in LSU here in Death Valley as a home dog. I think it's going to be a close game. So if you're going to give me 3 points as the home dog, Brian Kelly's been really good at LSU at home. He's only lost one game. He beat Saban there in Death Valley with, I think, a much better Bama team than this one. And I think this LSU team is better than that LSU team was. So going with LSU, and I'm going to sneak in on the over as well. Anything on LSU, Bama? I have a feeling you're on Milroe.
I don't have a play for it.
Okay.
I do like Milroe probably a little bit more than kind of your overall perception there. It sucks. He's one of the harder guys to evaluate because you see it for stretches. And that's probably the most frustrating in a prospect when there is those inconsistencies that when it's great, you absolutely see the vision, what he brings to the table. I think Jalen Hurts is a pretty great comparison for him as far as like the similarities physically, the way that they play, all these things. But I do agree. I think Hurts was more advanced as a passer, and there was something about it that like made me believe in a way that I haven't quite got there with Milroe just yet. So I'm staying away for this one. Probably lean towards Bama, but not one I feel strongly about either. This is kind of a week of college football, probably the slate that I've felt the least confident in for this week.
It's sidetracked before we get to NFL. I'm seeing on my screen right now, Jaden Ivey averaging 20 points, 47% from field goal, 41% from three.
Been good.
Am I being justified finally on I had my ranking of that draft where I went 1A Chet, 1B Palo, 3 Jaden Ivey, 4 Jabari Smith, and people were not happy about me with the Jabari Smith slander. And Jaden Ivey, I think, making me look smart finally. And the interesting thing is I wanted to ask you this actually this week, and I forgot to text you about it. Chet and Palo is, I think, going to become a really interesting conversation down the stretches of their career. Palo is more of the alpha guy, obviously. Yeah. He's a primary ball handler, at the very least, a secondary ball handler, and he's the guy who can kind of be the number one in your offense. But I think there's an argument that maybe Palo won't be good enough to be the number one on a team that can actually win anything. Mm-hmm. And I think there's an argument that Chet could be the perfect number two on a team that wins a lot, specifically his team there in OKC. I think there's a chance we end up looking back and I nailed that ranking exactly, and Chet has a better career than Palo.
Yeah, I absolutely think there's a chance that I love Chet. I've been a Chet guy since college. Like the biggest thing that I've always said as far as the Chet Holmgren takes, and this obviously has kind of worked itself out more than it was at the time. But whenever you see like a big man as frail or as skinny as Chet, the assumption is always that it's soft. That guy is soft. That is so far from the case with Chet, man. Like that dude brings it on every single night. He played 82 games last year. Like that's crazy for just about anyone, but more specifically when you're 7 foot plus and it has his body type there. So I think he took a huge leap as far as his, like basically every level of his game this year, rebounding, shooting the ball, his confidence. He's taking guys off the dribble a little more defensively. He's rotating as a guy that's protecting the rim at a super high level this year. He was leading the league in blocks as of last week. I haven't looked at it this week, but Chet's been awesome. It does suck Palo got injured because he was off to an incredible tear to start the season. And I shared the didn't quite see it with Jabari Smith. Leading up to things there. It's interesting. I had like the same conversation and it was with Jabari versus Palo. And that was kind of the debate because that was obviously for the 1 pick. And I continually got the case made to me that that's who it was with Jabari, is he could be this number 2 that was so excellent at these things. And I never quite saw it with him then. Like looking back at his Auburn tape, the dude couldn't really dribble. Like that was kind of the case then. He's gotten better to an extent, but he's still far from what he was hoped to be. So I think like for sure it's going to be it's interesting where Jabari stacks up in here. I don't want to count him out completely yet, but I guess to swing it back completely is Ivy has been very good, and I've been impressed with like the complete package as well. His playmaking's taken a leap, his decision making, he's seen the floor a little better. So I guess that we kind of mentioned this last week, but have some patience with guys is sort of the message across the board.
It's funny with the Sixers. I have a buddy who's been obsessed with finding, well, who knows what happens with the Sixers now, but with finding the guy that we deal KJ Martin for. Maybe you add Oubre salary, maybe you add Drummond salary, whoever. It depends who the guy is. And he has zeroed in on Tari Eason, like giving up like 3 first-round picks and KJ for Tari Eason. I have made the case, give me any of the Rockets. Give me Cam Whitmore. Give me Tari Eason. Give me Jabari Smith even. Even though I'm not the biggest Jabari Smith guy, really good rebounder. So actually kind of a good fit for the Sixers. So whoever Houston wants to give up on, because it feels like they've got to give up on someone. They've probably got to trade one of them. None of them get consistent minutes, and it's stunning all their growth, in my opinion. Cam Whitmore averaged like 23 per 36. Go look at Tari Eason's like 3rd in BPM. I saw this year from Turbo Dude. And then you have Jabari Smith, who kind of works perfectly for what the Sixers need. That's a whole other show. We'll get into that much more down the stretch, and we'll talk much more about the Sixers. I have no interest in talking about them right now.
Yeah, final thought on the Rockets side of things is they absolutely do need to make some sort of consolidation trade. They have 11 players averaging double-digit minutes so far this season, including Fred VanVleet, who is averaging, like, I believe 38 minutes per game right now, which is just like, what are we doing? What's the vision here? Give all those minutes to Reed Shepherd, to be perfectly honest, based on what like the developmental path should be. So yeah, they need to make some changes, and I'm with you that catch the scraps of what's falling out of Houston, because there's a lot of talent over there.
Totally agree. I totally agree there. Let's move on to the NFL, and starting off in the NFL, maybe the worst game of all time in Munich, Germany at 9:30. And guess what? I've got to play on every NFL game this week. Wow. I only like 3 of them, but I've got to play on all of them. And this is one that it's a 1-unit play. Almost all of them are 1-unit plays. Give me the Panthers plus 6.5. Bryce Young, some life out of him last week against the Saints. And how much worse are the Saints than the Giants? I don't think they're that much worse. The fact that they're a 6.5-point dog, it's in Germany. It's a weird environment for both of them. I think it's going to be an ugly, low-scoring type of game. Give me the 6.5 points. I think Carolina wins outright. How about that, Sean Barnard?
I like it. I would like to see a little Bryce Young redemption tour. That I truly like, as much as it's very clear it's been bad. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. But when I think back to the version of Bryce Young that we saw at Alabama, I truly did not feel the floor was as low as we've seen from him. You have to hope there's better days ahead. What's a better place than it happening in Germany over there? I do feel like this is borderline an act of war, giving them this game as who's being played. Definitely not the finest representation of American football over there. If I got to go any direction here, my brain definitely went towards the under, that I don't think this is going to be a great watch of a football game. I think it's going to be low scoring, sloppy, all of the above. But you could talk me into the Panthers for sure. And by the time Sunday morning rolls around, I'll probably be there. So I lean that side. The under would be my favorite play in this game, but I am rooting for Bryce Young a little bit.
It's so funny. I watched that game only via Red Zone, and I walked away thinking, because they showed every Bryce Young highlight, I walked away thinking he had a good game. He had 171 yards. Okay, whatever. I'm not going to pitch the redemption arc that much.
He smiled. Showed some smiles, you know.
He did. Plus 6.5. That's a lot of points for the New York Giants to be favored on a neutral field. I would take literally any team in the NFL at a couple college teams, I think. But let's move on to the 1 o'clock slate. I like the San Francisco 49ers -6 at Tampa Bay Bucks. The Niners are off a bye. They need this one. The Bucks are off Monday Night Football. Teams that play on just 6 days of rest off of an overtime game on Monday Night Football, 17-21 straight up, 15-23 against the spread over the last decade. I like fading teams off Monday Night Football in general. I think you can add a little more when there's a crushing overtime loss for a team that should have went for 2 in regulation, like Tampa should have. So Niners -6, Christian McCaffrey coming back. Any take on that one for you?
Lean towards the Niners with the Christian McCaffrey factor kind of caught into this. I still have not fully bought in on the San Francisco team for the season, that they just have not had that same look or really put together a complete football game through just about this entire season. I do feel like the Buccaneers' lack of weapons is just destined to catch up with them. That they've found their identity with Baker just slinging the football, him throwing it a ton and throwing it well. And I just wonder, like, there has to be a point. And obviously, last week I was very impressed with him still driving down that team at the end, still finding ways to produce. But I do think San Francisco is a bit of a different story there. Not that obviously playing the Chiefs is as high as the bar gets there, but I do think that San Fran, like the switch needs to flip at some point. I'm not ready to declare it's this week, but I certainly think that's in the cards. So lean towards probably San Fran taking care of business, but don't love this game from either direction.
The next game I'm going to talk about, I have a play on the total, not a side. We're going to the Buffalo Bills at the Indianapolis Colts. Give me the over. I'm going to take the over here at 46. I think there's some explosion potential with Josh Allen against the Gus Bradley defense that we have seen get gashed at times. The Bills 5-4 to the over. The Colts have actually cashed 4 straight unders. I actually think the offense gets going a little bit more here. The Buffalo defense, while it has been pretty good, they just gave up 27 to Tua. They gave up 23 to the Texans, 20 to the Jets. I don't think they're impenetrable, and I think you're getting 30 from Buffalo. So maybe you look at the team total over. This is probably my least favorite play on any of the games I'll give out, but lean towards the over.
Yeah, I like Buffalo in this one, and I like the -4. That I know they haven't had that like blow you away game just yet, but they're 7-2, man, and they're gonna be like a high level football team that has a chance. Josh Allen is still Josh Allen, and like as much as Joe Flacco has been this awesome story and it's fun, you can't like we got to be real about the expectations for Joe.
He was
Flacco.
terrible last week.
Yeah, yeah, that was a brutal watch last week, and like it's to an extent an improvement over Richardson because you know what you're getting more with Flacco, with Richardson just being a straight wild card. But I don't think he's a guy capable, especially at this point in his career, in elevating that team around him. So I kind of think this turns into a full blowout. I like Buffalo to cover the -4, and I honestly would have guessed the spread was a little bit higher there.
Yeah, I like Buffalo too, but I would lean that way as well. I think it's a little bit of a trap, it feels like, for Buffalo there at that -4, and they almost can. Buffalo's in a Buffalo's in a weird spot where it feels like Kansas City's getting the 1 seed no matter what. And at that point, is Buffalo going to fight for the 2 seed? You already lost to Baltimore. You almost just have to win that division, and there's no competition in that division at all. So I think that Buffalo kind of gets there's not going to be an important game for Buffalo for a while. And I know they play the Chiefs next week. This is a little bit of a look-ahead game if you believe in that type of thing. But I would still lean that way with Buffalo. And the reason I'm taking the over is I think Josh Allen going to have a big game. So I'm right there with you. Next game here, and it's a shame because this would have been one of my favorite bets of the week. I'm going with Atlanta -3.5 at New Orleans. But I liked this a lot more before they fired their coach. It's now a fired coach game. I will say they're only 17-22 in the last 39 games straight up, and it's a small spread there at 3.5. But if you're just talking about straight up on the field, the Atlanta Falcons are the most under-talked about really good team in the NFL here. So they're sitting here at 6-3. They're going to walk to the division title. I think they're probably going to be the 2 seed in the NFC. So the Atlanta Falcons not getting enough attention. I think they keep it going.
Yeah, I'm mostly with you. I'm staying away from that fired coach factor, although I don't think this is quite the situation where it's going to spark a turnaround. I mean, just look at the Jets for a team that this has not proven at all. And frankly, the Jets are a far more talented football team just from a roster standpoint than this New Orleans Saints team. So I don't see much signs of life. I think the issues are far deeper than just what Dennis Allen was bringing to the table. I'll say Michael Thomas calling out Derek Carr on Twitter throughout that entire game last night didn't make me feel particularly good about the odds of Derek Carr moving forward. And I mean, he did put Chris Olave in a hospital with somebody and has in a couple different weeks this year. So I get all the feelings all around. I do think there's real deal issues with that Saints team. And let's not forget that they started the year 2-0 and there was all this hype about maybe the Super Bowl is coming to New Orleans from people out there. So, oh, how the mighty have fallen. I do think the Falcons roll, but probably won't be a play for me.
Next game up, I'm going with the New England Patriots +6.5 at the Chicago Bears. This Bears team has quit on Matt Eberflus. It's a joke that they brought him back into this season. DJ Moore walking off the field during a play. Tyreek Stevenson and everything that happened there. The team was not happy with how that was handled by Eberflus. The team quit. And you saw that last week, 29-9, a play right before halftime. Amari DiMercato, Arizona's just running the ball out to waste time. And DiMercato breaks a long run just because Chicago thinks they're kneeing it out, basically. ugly effort from that Chicago team. You saw Caleb Williams after I think last week's game was the highest pressure rate that any quarterback has faced in the last 6 years of the pressure rate being kept. I think it was 2017. The last one was higher. It was like 46% or something like that. It might have been higher. And then there was a play during the game where Caleb was running around where he literally threw his arms up kind of at one point in the run. That looks like a guy who's getting defeated a little bit by the situation that he's being handed. And, you could look at that one way and be negative about Caleb. I'm going to look at it the other way and think, man, this is just a terrible situation. And everyone talked about the receivers. Everyone talked about DeAndre Swift. The running game's non-existent. The O-line's terrible. And the play calling's horrible. So there's a lot of problems there. They obviously made the wrong decision when they hired Shane Waldron as their OC instead of Cliff Kingsbury. I think their season's over from a contending standpoint. Give me the Patriots plus 6.5. I think they have a chance to win the game outright.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that there was so much talk leading up to the season, myself included, about what a great infrastructure that they've built for this young quarterback, that you have real deal weapons for him. You have all these things. They've overlooked some of the most significant portions, with coaching obviously being the forefront of that. The offensive line play has been pretty brutal from start to finish. There was kind of that midpoint of the season where it looked like they were fixing things, and we're back on the downhill. Yeah, I thought last week looked like the weeks 1 through 3 that we saw this Bears team, that it was all of a sudden, what's going on here? So it's frustrating because I still think the talent is there on that roster, and I don't think Caleb's getting a fair shake whatsoever, regardless of your opinions of him. So I probably can be talked into the Patriots. I'll also say I've been an anti-Drake May guy, but I've been fairly impressed so far that I think he's looked solid. So we'll see how things shake out. I'm not ready to hop on either bandwagon at this point, but I do think the sink is shipping, or the ship is sinking out there in Chicago right now.
I like that. Sink is shipping. I like that. The next game up, this is going to be a tough one for Sean, I know, because he's out on the Steelers without Justin Fields in there. But I'm taking the Steelers this week, plus 3 at the Commanders. Tomlin's 41-28-1 against the spread as a road dog. When the Steelers have a worse record as a road dog, Tomlin's 17-10-1 against the spread. And I just think we've reached a point where people are a little bit too high on the Commanders. And I'm high on the Commanders, but they're now getting entered into top 5, top 7s of power rankings above teams like Green Bay, like Philadelphia, like some other teams. I don't see them at that level. So I think the Steelers and the Commanders at the same level, but I think this is kind of a gut check game for Jaden Daniels a little bit. And that Commanders offense that's high flying for sure. Steelers have a really good defense. TJ Watt, I think, is going to be a mismatch for that tackle on the edge. So I like the Steelers to keep it a little bit lower scoring than people think. I kind of lean towards the under, but I like the Steelers to win the game.
I'll go head to head with you here. That
Okay.
I do agree with your overall sentiment that I do think the Commanders' love has gotten a little strong, that there is a little crowning prematurely here. But I do think this is a matchup where I think they're built to sustain the level of attack that Pittsburgh's going to bring, as far as they're going to keep it, ground and pound to an extent until they let Russ open it up a little bit. They're going to try and control tempo, eat pace. That they've been top 5 in time possession all year. I believe they sit at 3rd right now. This is kind of the kind of game that I think it is worth buying a little bit of the alternate spread. That, looking at the DraftKings number, I think going -2.5 at -120 odds is, I feel, far better about than the -3 straight up on that. But I do think there is something about Jaden Daniels. He has taken a step back to an extent, but still looks very good. I think this Washington team is clicking. And I also listened to a real interesting interview about how they build out their offense, which made a ton of sense to me. That rather than this is our style of play, this is the system we want to play in. Day one, when Jaden Daniels got there, they said, give me the 5 baseline plays that you can run just like that automatically, and then basically branched out from there. And I can't believe more teams don't think like that, to be perfectly honest. It's clearly working from day one, and I know there were the critiques early on about it being a little bit too college-y as an offense for all that, but things are humming down there in Washington. I am buying the hype to an extent, so sign me up for -2.5 here.
Cliff is running the 2023 LSU offense.
Yeah.
I saw someone put a thread up about it on Twitter, and it's just he's running the same plays that they ran at LSU that worked really well with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. Out there at LSU. So, by the way, we're going to look back at that LSU team like, how the heck did Brian Kelly not put a competent enough defense on the field to not go better than 9-3 with Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors, who look like all pros, and Jaden Daniels looks like the best quarterback he's ever coached. So that's a whole other conversation. But I think I've used that phrase like 10 times on this show. The Minnesota Vikings and the Jacksonville Jaguars going up against each other. The line 6.5 here. Mac Jones coming in because Trevor Lawrence is out for this game. I think a lot of Trevor Lawrence slander from the other guy on this show over there. I think you will see that there is a difference when you put Mac Jones out there. I think that this Jags offense can look really bad. I lean towards the Vikings. I'm not going to bet it, but what I am betting in this game is Justin Jefferson anytime touchdown, which I think I'm just going to start auto betting. If you look at it throughout his career, he scores more often than he does in 5 of 8 games with a touchdown this year too. So Justin Jefferson plus 125. That's going to, I think, going forward, be an auto bet.
Yeah, by the way, when you mentioned kind of star-studded LSU teams, pretty wild that Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson were college teammates as well.
With Joe Burrow.
Yeah, with Joe Burrow. So obviously they did take care of business and win a championship there at the time, but kind of crazy, kind of reflecting on that team there. While I am a Trevor Lawrence hater, I'm not a Mac Jones lover, man. That I can't get talked into this from the +7 side of things. I do think Minnesota takes care of business here. That defense for Jacksonville is just absolutely brutal, man. They're 30th in points allowed, 31st in points given up. I don't see it getting any better. I do think this is a little bit of the Sam Darnold that we saw at the start of this season. I think he rebounds and has a really strong game here, and I think that Minnesota is able to put up a number of points that Jacksonville just can't match. So sign me up for the -7. I can see this turning into a blowout.
I'm definitely that would definitely be where I'd lean. The last 1 o'clock game is the Kansas City Chiefs against the Denver Broncos. Kansas City -7.5. What I'm doing, my can't lose teaser, undefeated this year at 3-0. The last 2 weeks, I haven't bet it. I've had the teaser ready. I think I gave it out last week on this show, and then I got cold feet and didn't bet it. One of the games scared me. The last 2 weeks, I haven't bet it, but I had it ready. 2-0 even in those weeks. It hit in the game, the weeks I didn't even cash it. But 3-0 when I have placed it this year, shrinking it from 3 teams to 2 teams this time. 6-point teaser instead of a 10-point teaser. Give me the Chiefs -1.5, teased down from 7.5 against the Broncos, and give me the Chargers -1.5 down from -7.5 later on against the Tennessee Titans, which we'll get into in a minute. But anything on Broncos Chiefs there, the whole world's going to be teasing it, so I understand it's a dumb thing to do, but I'm right there doing it.
Yeah, as far as the game, I do like the teaser and where your head's at for that. As far as this game specifically, I do lean towards the +7.5 in favor of Denver here. That I just don't see that same like killer instinct in Kansas City this year. That it feels like they're playing with their food a little bit more. The Patrick Mahomes interceptions have been an issue, and I feel like Mahomes specifically has been a guy that like he knows when to take over and when to turn it on, but there hasn't been like this same level of start to finish, complete locked in performance from a team standpoint here. And that's concerning to me. I don't think Denver is this world beater by any means, but they're a competent football team. Bo Nix has had his ups and downs, but overall, I think he's shown progress throughout the season. That's encouraging to me, at least. So we'll see how things shake out, but I could see this ending up a far closer game than it should be. And I think this is probably one that stays a game until the end. So sign me up for the +7.5, but I do like where your mind's at with the teaser.
Moving on to that next part of that teaser is the LA Chargers, who I'm betting straight up also at -7.5 against the Tennessee Titans. Justin Herbert has taken care of business against terrible teams in his career. If you look at his track record, when he's closed as a 7-point favorite or higher in 8 career starts, Chargers are 8-0 in those games, 6-2 against the spread in those games, including 6-0 straight up at home and 5-1 against the spread. As a starter, Will Levis 4-10. Straight up and against the spread. He's only scored more than 17 points one time in those 14 games. That's a crazy stat. So I'm going to go with the under as well. Give me the under at 39 in Titans Chargers. And this game leads the week in crazy stats because this is the craziest stat I've ever seen. And this is I'll let Sean Barnard go off here. Justin Herbert in his last 19 games is 17-2 to the under. That is a crazy stat.
Sounds about right to me. That's the formula for Justin Herbert as your quarterback, because you don't let him throw it that much. And I do think that they have unleashed him a little bit. He's been this recent stretch of games, with all honesty, here is the best that I've seen him play. Definitely at the NFL level. And I probably would go as far as to say straight up. I think I've been more impressed than anything I saw from him in college as well. So I do give him a little bit of his flowers there. I do probably lean towards the -7.5 in favor of the Chargers for this, but this is far more a play on I think the Titans are a disaster and heading that way than anything in that belief for them. So I'm with you as far as the under and the -7.5, still out on the Justin Herbert experience.
I think the Chargers are going to have serious problems against really good teams, but I think they're going to continue to pummel bad teams. I think that's the type of team that they are.
Yeah.
Denver's kind of in that same tier as well. At 425, everybody knows the deal, but Jalen Hurts touchdown plus 125, 5 of 8 games he's scored this year, 8 touchdowns in those 5 games that he's scored. So it could even be better than that 5 of 8. Timeout. Hold the phone. NBA tangent. Mike Bray, who was the Notre Dame head coach for like 23 years, is the Hawks' lead assistant with Quinn Snyder. They're showing him on the screen. Had no idea. By the way, I bet on the Hawks big. This is for those listening. We're recording this on Friday night for Saturday morning. I bet on the Hawks big. Tobias Harris is killing me, Sean Bernard. It's not a good away. Not a good.
He never goes away, Mark.
Oh, Sean, he is killing me. It's unbelievable. Ugh, it's disgusting. My other favorite bet of the week next to Jalen Hurts, and it's really the only play I love because that teaser is my third favorite play. Everything else is a one-unit play, and now we've got Paul Reed dunking on my head. It's unbelievable what is happening betting against the Pistons in this game. Give me the Arizona Cardinals money line versus the New York Jets. That line has switched from -1.5 to +1.5. As a member of the Jets, Aaron Rodgers has started 2 games on extended rest. The Jets have scored a combined 27 total points, and they're 0-2 straight up and against the spread in those games. So I understand people like them because they're coming off a Thursday night. Paul Reed just hit a 3 in my face. And this is unbelievable. I don't know what's happening. I mean, the Hawks are down 15. It's like 8 minutes into the game. This is great stuff.
A lot of ball
great
left.
Content on Saturday morning that people will love to hear about last night's Hawks-Pistons game. But sheesh. Give me the Cardinals. They're my favorite bet of the week on any side. And I don't have a lot of stats. I don't have fancy trends. I don't have fancy numbers. I've been critical of Jonathan Gannon. I've been critical of Drew Petzing. Seems like they've got it figured out there, to be quite honest now. So I really, really like the Arizona Cardinals this week. I think it's just a disrespectful line from Vegas. I know that they love the Jets. They're not going to give up on them. And it worked for them last week against the Texans. Didn't work for them for the first 8 weeks of the year. So give me Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona's been as Jekyll and Hyde as a team can come, and that they've looked very good and they've looked very bad throughout. This is not a game that I have a play on. I will shift back to the Eagles conversation.
I forgot. Yeah, I was gonna ask you to shift back. That's my bad.
No, Paul Reed was hitting threes in your face. You got interrupted. I understand, man. But I'll just say for the Eagles game, lay the points, man. -7.5. Don't worry about it. This is a bad Cowboys team. And I think we're getting a little bit too lost in the lore of the Dallas-Philadelphia side of things. You just take a step back and identify these teams as 2 football teams. The Eagles are playing their best football, and the Cowboys look like a disaster. Obviously, no Dak Prescott, but Cooper Rush stepping in there. And even like when also a quick shout out to Nick Sirianni for his little slip up at the press conference today that Jalen Hurts is now dealing with an ankle injury, not rest, and just incredible stuff from Sirianni straight up. But as this game as a whole, I have pretty much no worry. This is one of the best that I felt about the Eagles heading into a game. So sign me up for the -7.5.
We're in a safe space here, right?
Yeah.
I'm worried about the game.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not betting it. It just feels like it's going to be way too close, and we're going to be really angry about it.
I just don't see how Dallas is going to do anything offensively. Like I truly think they look like a bad football team right now. Like I did not think we were very low on the Cowboys heading into this year, that we were both like, I don't understand how they're being talked about as like guaranteed playoff team, because I didn't see it then. It's even worse than I expected it would be for this team. So I'm out on Dallas completely.
They're bad. No, X's and O's wise, you're absolutely right. This is just a feel thing. I have a bad feeling. I can't really explain it. I think it's the look ahead to Thursday night with the Commanders that scares me. But they should win this one. They really should, because after this, they have a tough 3-game stretch. You have Commanders at home, at Rams, at Ravens, before a nice, a little cushy part of the schedule where you close the year. Carolina at home, Pittsburgh at home, at Washington. Pittsburgh, Washington, not easy. Then you get Dallas at home and New York at home. But I would say 3 of the last 5 games being home games against the Panthers, Cowboys, and Giants is a nice way to end the season. So I think that means they have 9 wins already. They're winning those 3 games. So we just have to figure out how many of the other games we're going to win to see where we get from there. Let's close out with the night games here. Sunday Night Football. Detroit Lions 3.5-point favorites at the Houston Texans. Nico Collins questionable. Tank Dell questionable. Stephon Diggs out. Anything for you, Sean Barnard?
I still like the over, to be honest, even with the injuries. That I think Detroit's offense looks pretty unbelievable right now. Like one of the better offenses that I've seen, all the creativity that they have. And I do think Houston's capable of at least, I wouldn't say match stride for stride. I think they probably lose this game. That I do lean towards Detroit taking care of business and getting the win. But I think that the Texans will have an answer for at least a stretch of this game. The 48.5 feels a little bit low to me. I think this is going to be a shootout. So the over is my favorite play here, but lean towards Detroit getting the win.
Give me a Monra St. Brown touchdown. Six
like
straight games with a touchdown. I didn't know that until I looked at his fantasy page, but 6 of 8 games on the year and 6 straight. So Monra might be an auto bet with Justin Jefferson now. So Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels fallen by the wayside a little bit. So need to find my touchdown scores to go to every week. And then last game of the week, Monday Night Football, Rams or Dolphins at Rams. Pretty much a pick 'em. I'm going with the Rams. I think Dolphins are bad. And they're 0-2 this year with Tua. Even the first 2 games, or 0-2 the last 2 weeks with Tua, even the first 2 games, really struggled against Jacksonville. Should not have won that game in week 1. Came back because of a turnover, and it was a crazy game. And then in week 2, they go out and get embarrassed before Tua gets concussed. So anything for you on this one? I'm going with the Rams.
Yeah, don't really like either direction here, to be perfectly honest. This is going to be a crapshoot of a football game to me. I do think if I have to pick a direction, probably the under of 50.5 for this. And there's a part of me that kind of doesn't want to believe the Dolphins are as bad as they've looked, because it just doesn't quite compute why in my brain that Jalen Waddle has been dreadful this year and really hasn't been able to have any sort of production. Tyreek Hill should be able to elevate an offense more than has been the case. And Tua is obviously back in the fold now. So I can't quite understand why they look as bad as they do, but they absolutely have. So I don't really believe in either one of these teams. I'll probably ride with the under, but not a game that I have a strong take on.
And that does it for the NFL slate for week 10. And that's going to do it for the Tough Cover Radio Show. So let's head over to the Villanova pregame. That has been the Tough Cover Radio Show with Sean Barnard and me. Thanks to Sean. You can follow him at Sean_Barnard1. You follow me at Mark Henry Jr. _. Follow Fox Sports at Fox PHL Gambler on Twitter to get involved with the conversation. And tune in now for John Jansen on the Villanova pregame.